Nobody in the neighborhood ever looked at Emeka Osei and saw anything worth watching. He was the kind of man people's eyes passed over, the way a hand sweeps across a table and misses a small stone, not because the stone is not there, but because the hand never bothered to press down and feel. Emeka was 31 years old, thin-shouldered, and quiet in a way that people confused with emptiness. He lived in a one-room apartment on the third floor of a tired building on Adeola Street, in a part of Lagos where the generator noise never fully stopped, and the smell of street food drifted through the window every morning, like a slow, kind visitor. He had no car. He carried a laptop bag that was slightly too big for his frame. He walked to work every morning, 23 minutes if the road was clear, 31 if it was not, and he never complained about it, not to anyone, not even to himself in the quiet moments before sleep. He had learned a long time ago that complaining was just noise that kept a man company while he stayed in the same place. Emeka had no interest in staying in the same place. At the office where he worked as a junior logistics coordinator, he was the man who arrived first and left last. Not because anyone asked him to, not because he was rewarded for it. He did it because the office was quiet in those early hours, and quiet was where Emeka did his best thinking. His colleagues liked him in the small, careless way people like furniture. It is useful, it is there, and you do not think about it until it is gone. His supervisor, Mr. Adeze, was the kind of man who wore his authority like a tight shirt, visible at all times and slightly uncomfortable. He passed over Emeka for promotion 3 years in a row. The first year, he said Emeka lacked visibility. The second year, he said Emeka lacked initiative. The third year, he said nothing at all, which was somehow worse. Emeka accepted each of these moments, the way a river accepts a stone thrown into it, with a brief disturbance on the surface, and then stillness again. Outside the office, there was the family. Emeka's extended family gathered 4 or 5 times a year for celebrations, and these gatherings had a particular rhythm that Emeka had grown to recognize. The first hour was greetings, the second was food, the third was comparisons, and this was the hour Emeka dreaded most. Not because he feared it, but because he was tired of the energy it cost him to sit still through it. His cousin Tunde had just bought a Jeep. His cousin Adaora was getting married to a man who worked in oil and gas. His aunt's son had moved to Canada. These achievements were not simply shared, they were presented, like trophies on a shelf, and the unspoken question that hung in the room like smoke was always the same. And what about you, Emeka? His uncle, Chief Namdi, was the loudest voice in any room he entered, and at a family dinner one December, he made Emeka the subject of his loudest speech yet. "This boy," he said, leaning back in his chair with the comfortable authority of a man who has never doubted himself, "this boy has been working the same junior position for how long now? 5 years? 6? A man without ambition is a man without a future." He laughed as he said it. Others laughed too, not cruelly, exactly, but in that easy way people laugh when someone else is the subject of a joke, and they are glad it is not them. Emeka looked at his plate. He picked up his fork. He ate. He did not explain himself, and he did not defend himself, and he did not say the thing that sat quiet and heavy at the back of his throat, which was, "You have no idea what I am building." He said nothing. He went home that night, opened his laptop, and worked until 2 in the morning. Because that was the thing about Emeka that no one could see. He was building something. He had been building it for 3 years in that small apartment, at that small desk, under that single lamp that his mother had given him when he moved out. He was building a logistics software platform, a system that would allow small and medium-sized businesses across West Africa to manage their supply chains without needing expensive consultants or complicated technology. He had no investor, he had no partner, he had no one cheering him on from the sidelines. He had a laptop, a strong internet connection, and a belief so quiet and so deep that it did not need to be spoken aloud to be real. There had been rejections, many of them. He kept a folder in his email labeled simply, "No," and it had, at its peak, 43 messages in it. Each one was a company, or an investor, or a potential partner, who had looked at what he was building and decided it was not worth their time. He read every rejection once. He noted what was useful in the feedback, discarded what was not, and moved forward. He did not allow himself to stay in the disappointment the way some people stay in a warm bath, long past the point where it is doing any good. Meanwhile, The world around him continued to form opinions. There was a WhatsApp group, the one with the old secondary school classmates, where his name came up every few months. Someone would post a business article, and someone else would say, "We need our own Dangote." And a third person would reply with a laughing face and say, "Emeka is still waiting for his big break." And this would generate a cluster of laughing faces, and then the conversation would move on. Emeka was in the group. He read the messages. He never replied. There was also a woman. Her name was Ngozi, and she had been important to Emeka for 2 years in his late 20s. She was bright and warm, and had a laugh that started slowly and then arrived all at once, like a door opening. He had cared for her deeply, but Ngozi had grown frustrated with what she could not see. She could not see the late nights or the 43 rejections or the steady, patient work. She could only see the small apartment and the absent promotions, and the man who always seemed to be waiting for something that never arrived. She left him on a Wednesday evening, calmly and without cruelty, and told him she needed someone who was going somewhere. Emeka stood at his window for a long time after she left. The street below was busy with the ordinary traffic of evening. A woman selling tomatoes, 2 boys kicking a plastic bottle, a motorcycle weaving between cars. He watched it all and let himself feel the loss fully, the way you press a bruise to know where it hurts. Then he turned from the window, sat down at his desk, and opened his laptop. 3 months later, he completed version 1 of the platform. He called it Navicore, a name he had written in the margin of a notebook 2 years earlier, circled twice, and never changed. He spent a further 4 months testing it, correcting it, making it simpler and faster and more reliable. He brought in no one to help him. He tested it himself, broke it himself, fixed it himself. He was not in a hurry. He had learned that the people who are in a hurry are usually the ones who arrive at the wrong destination. He sent his pitch to 11 companies. 7 did not reply. 3 replied with polite rejections. The 11th, a mid-sized supply chain firm based in London called Halford Logistics, replied asking for a call. The call lasted 40 minutes. At the end of it, the woman on the other side, a quiet, precise director named Miss Caroline Webb, said she would like to bring the proposal to her board. Emeka thanked her, ended the call, and made himself a cup of tea. He sat with the cup in both hands and allowed himself, for exactly 1 moment, to close his eyes. The board approved it. The contract, a licensing and development agreement, was valued at $4.2 million over 3 years, with an option to expand into East African markets in year 2. It was the kind of number that changed a life not just financially, but structurally. It changed what was possible, what was visible, and what could no longer be ignored. The announcement came on a Thursday morning. A business journalist in Lagos had picked up the story through Halford's press release, and by 10 o'clock, the article was circulating. By noon, it had been shared several hundred times. By evening, Emeka Osei's name was in 3 different Nigerian business publications and 2 international ones. The WhatsApp group was the first place the news arrived in Emeka's social world. Someone posted the article link at 10:47 in the morning. For 40 seconds there was silence, unusual for a group that normally moved fast. Then came the first message. "Wait, is this our Emeka?" And then another. "This cannot be the same person." And then the group lit up. "Congratulations!" Exclamation marks. Voice notes. Prayer hands. Someone called him brother, who had never called him that before. Someone said, "I always knew he had it in him." Emeka read every message. He did not reply to any of them. Chief Namdi called that same afternoon. The phone rang, and Emeka looked at the name on the screen. He thought about the December dinner, the easy laughter, the comfortable dismissal. He let the phone ring. It rang again 20 minutes later, and again that evening. On the 4th call, Emeka answered. His uncle's voice was different, softer, slower, as if it had been rearranged. He offered congratulations. He called Emeka my son. Emeka thanked him briefly and warmly, and ended the call. He held no bitterness. He simply had nothing more to say. Ngozi sent a message the following day. It was 3 sentences long. The first said she had heard the news. The second said she was proud of him. The third said she had been thinking about him. Emeka read it while standing in line at the bank. He read it again. Then he put his phone in his pocket and moved forward in the line. He understood that she was not wrong for what she had done. She had seen the surface, and made a reasonable judgment. But he also understood that he had moved somewhere she could not reach now, and that was not cruelty, it was simply the truth. The reaction at his office was the one that gave him the quietest satisfaction. Mr. Adeze, who had passed him over for 3 years, called him into the small office with the glass wall and the framed certificate on the shelf and extended a hand. "I had no idea," the man said. Emeka shook his hand. "Most people didn't," he said, and left it at that. He resigned the following week. He did it without drama, on a Tuesday morning, with a letter that was 2 paragraphs long and entirely gracious. His colleagues organized a small farewell gathering, with plastic cups and a store-bought cake. He stood among them and smiled, and accepted their kind words, and felt, for the first time in years, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because of the success, but because of what the success represented. The end of a chapter he had been ready to leave for a very long time. What the people around him found most difficult to understand was his stillness. They expected celebration. They expected some display of triumph, a post, an announcement, some visible release of all those years of pressure. But Emeka moved through the days that followed his success the same way he had moved through the years before it, deliberately, quietly, without performance. He set up a proper office. He hired 2 junior developers. He had 3 further meetings with Halford. He called his mother every Sunday. His mother, Mama Emeka, had never mocked him. She was a woman who had worked as a seamstress for 30 years, with hands that were always slightly rough and always slightly warm, and she had looked at her son since he was a boy, with a kind of knowing that she never put into words. When he called to tell her about the contract, she was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that is full, not empty. Then she said, simply, "I know," 2 words, and they were enough. They were more than enough. They were everything. A young man from the neighborhood, 17 years old, found Emeka's contact through a mutual connection, and sent a message, asking if he could speak with him. His name was Chukwudi, and he was in his final year of secondary school and building a small mobile app in his spare time, and had no one to talk to about it. Emeka replied within the hour. They met the following Saturday at a small cafe on the main road, and Emeka listened to the boy talk for 40 minutes. About his idea, his fears, his mother who thought he was wasting time, the classmates who laughed. When the boy finished talking, Emeka was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The laughter is a signal. It means you are doing something they cannot understand yet. The only question is whether you stop because of it, or whether you continue in spite of it." Chukwudi looked at him. "What if I am wrong about my idea?" he asked. Emeka smiled. "Then you will find out, and you will adjust, and you will build something better. But you will not find out by stopping." He paid for the drinks. They shook hands. He met with Chukwudi 4 more times over the following months. The thing about Emeka, the thing that people slowly began to understand as they watched him in the months following his success, was that he had not changed. He was the same man who had walked quietly to work every morning, who had sat at the edge of rooms, who had absorbed the laughter without returning it. He had not become someone new. He had always been this person. The world had simply shifted its angle and finally seen what was already there. That is the thing about an aura. It is not something a man puts on. It is not a costume or a performance or a reward for reaching a certain number. It is what remains when everything false has been stripped away. The noise, the need for approval, the fear of being seen and judged and found lacking. Emeka had spent years in that stripping process. He had been mocked and dismissed and overlooked and left. And each of those experiences had taken something from him that he did not need, and left behind something he did. What was left was the kind of stillness that fills a room when a certain person enters it. Not because that person demands attention, but because they no longer need it. On a quiet evening in March, almost 6 months after the announcement, Emeka sat on the small balcony of a new apartment. Larger now, higher up, with a view of the city that spread out wide and lit in the early dark. He held a glass of cold water in both hands, the way he had always held his cup of tea. The city below was the same city it had always been, loud and alive and full of people building their own quiet fires in the dark. He did not think about Chief Namdi's laughter, or the WhatsApp messages, or the 43 rejection emails, or the Wednesday evening Ngozi had walked out of his apartment. He thought about Chukwudi, And whatever the boy was building right now in his small room, and whether it would work, and whether it mattered if it didn't. He thought about his mother's 2 words. He thought about the next version of Navicore, which was already forming in the back of his mind, piece by careful piece. The city hummed beneath him. The sky above was wide and dark, and full of stars that did not announce themselves but simply were. Burning steadily, without audience, without applause. Emeka sat among them in his own quiet way, exactly as he had always sat. Still, unhurried, and already at work on what came next.